Hello everyone, I'm Scratch from Snake Eyes MTG, and today we're going to be presenting you another episode of Pioneering Modern. Today I'll be joined by my two good friends. On the bottom left we have Anthony, and on the bottom right we have Joe. So Joe,
Hey,
how are you doing?
yeah, not too bad. Thank you very much. It's nice weather. Enjoying the weekend, and today is actually my wedding anniversary, my fourth wedding anniversary. So it's quite nice. I got my wife nothing, and my wife got me nothing. So we're happy.
You give nothing, you get nothing. I mean, it's what they call fair trade.
Oh, definitely.
The law of equivalent exchange.
Yes. Oh, nice. Nice reference there. I like it. But,
Okay, and then we also have Anthony. How are you doing?
I am actually in a fantastic mood and very happy to be here. I'm excited about the deck I'm talking about today, and yeah, just having fun.
Yeah, I mean, as you've kind of mentioned, the aim of today's podcast is to present you with some modern decks that you would be able to play, as Anthony kind of has foreshadowed. Each of us will be bringing a deck of the archetypes that we are most comfortable and most fan of playing. That Joe would be the one to start us off. Do you guys have anything else to say
absolutely.
before we get to the deck techs?
No, well, so for this, I am going to be presenting the deck that I have had the most success with, I hope that you guys will like it as much as me. This is for people who don't want to win straight away, but don't want to run out of time.
So, what's the core strategy of the deck, or what would you like to present about the deck to us that makes it unique?
Okay, so this deck is called Karnza, and it makes use of a particular 4-mana planeswalker from War of the Spark called Karn, the Great Creator. And it's got a static ability, so that means it's always present whilst it's on the board. That turns off abilities of artifacts your opponents control. So that basically means that any artifact that your opponent has, it can't be activated. And this deck, it revolves around, there's a few staples of the deck that really you can't do without. The first is Karn, this one that you're looking at now. The next is Blood Moon, my favourite enchantment, and a card that really upsets a lot of people. So Blood Moon, this is a 3-mana red enchantment, and it just says that non-basic lands are mountains. So what this does is any non-basic land, it no longer taps for the colour that your opponent wants it to. So it only taps for red, and that includes fetching. So it's much more difficult for your opponents to fill their graveyard with fetches. It turns off counterspell if they've only got one blue source, one basic island on the board, which I've used to good effect plenty of times. It generally makes your opponent's life difficult if they want to double spell, or if they want to play out their own strategy. So this is a very difficult card for many decks to get around. Another card that we want to look at is the mana ramp package. So we've got two cards actually to look at. We have Arbor Elf and we have Utopia Sprawl. So these are really, mana ramp cards that we can use to pump out a turn 3, or in some cases a turn 2 Karn the Great Creator. So being able to pump out a 4-drop on turn 2 is generally where you want to be. It's a good place to be. So this deck, it's a prison deck, because Karn, if we look at Karn again, Karn, what you can do is you can look at your sideboard by minusing it, -2. Now, this is a pretty unique effect in at least meta modern. There are a few cards in the in the card pool that can grab a card from the sideboard, but generally speaking, they're not powerful enough to make it into the format. Karn, though, is the exception. Karn says that you may choose an artifact card you own from outside the game or in exile, reveal that card and put it into your hand. So you can grab a card from your sideboard depending on the situation that you're in. If you find yourself against, say, a creature deck, you can grab an artifact that helps you against creatures. If you're against a control deck, etc., etc., if you're against a combo deck, perhaps you need to turn off an artifact of the opponent's. You can grab a card that does that. So, of course, Karn turns off artifacts, but you understand what I mean. It can turn off, different permanents on the board. So, what we're looking to do is we're looking to stax our opponent out of the game with this deck. So let's just quickly go through it all. So we have 4 Arbor Elf, we have 2 Bone Crusher Giant, we have 1 copy of Endurance. This Endurance, it's a nod to the current meta, which is a lot of blue-red Murktide, which this happens to, be quite good against, especially, if you can have it on game 1. Then we have 3 copies of Clothis, God of Destiny, 4 copies of Seasoned Pyro for some card draw, and 4 copies of my favourite elemental from the Modern Horizons 2 cycle, Fury. This one actually, funnily enough, it's now worth a lot of money, but when I bought it, I saw it straight away and said that is going to be absolutely busted. But everyone was telling me I was wrong. Oh, it can be bolted. Oh, it's easily removed by lightning bolt. Blah 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 blah. But I was right, and I bought a playset of full art foil ones for about £5 a pop or £6 a pop, and then they shot up to, well, a lot more than that because people realised how good they were going to be. Then the next one, Renin 6. So we've got 2 copies of that. We have 2 copies of Chandra, Torch of Defiance, 4 copies of Karn the Great Creator, 4 Lightning Bolt, 4 Utopia Sprawl, 4 Blood Moon, 2 Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and then we have 20 lands of fetches and shocks, and we're including in that we have 2 copies of Beseiju, who endures, which is a very nice card to have when you have Renin 6 on the board. And especially if you're in a deck like this, you're trying to stack your opponent out of the game, Beseiju can be very useful. First of all, let's take a quick look at the sideboard, just to give you an idea of what this deck is all about. Now, because you're playing Karn, it means that your sideboard isn't quite the same as a normal deck would be. Normally you'd have 15 cards, all of which you might have 2s of or 3s of that can help you against different matchups and can help you with the various decks that are in the meta. This one, however, you can't do that, or it's not good. It's not a good idea to do that. Of course, you can do that, but it's generally not done. You only need one of, because you want the absolute maximum flexibility from Karn. So I'll just quickly go through the sideboard. So we have one Chalice of the Void, we have one Engineered Explosives, we have one Tormod Crypt, one Walking Ballista, one Pithing Needle, then we have one Relic of Progenitus, one Liquimetal Coating, one Ensnaring Bridge, and one Worm Coil Engine. So to be able to talk about what this deck does, it's important for me to sort of talk you through the sideboard and tell you what each of these sideboard cards brings to the table. Now, one of the most common and most popular ones to fetch first with Karn when you slam a Karn down on the board is Liquimetal Coating. So if we look at Liquimetal Coating right now, so it's a 2-mana artifact, and it can come down and tap, and target permanent becomes an artifact in addition to its other types until end of turn. This has quite a few, should we say, utility. It has many ways it can be used. So, for example, if you have Karn on the board, you can tap Liquimetal Coating, targeting one of your opponent's lands on their upkeep, and that basically locks that land out for their turn. The tapping of a land is an activated ability, so therefore, if it's an artifact, Karn says that activated abilities cannot be activated. The other use of this Liquimetal Coating, it's also, if we look at the +1 of Karn the Great Creator, it says here, so +1 until your next turn, up to one target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness each equal to its converted mana cost, or as they say now, mana value. So Karn, basically what you have to do here is, if you want to destroy your opponent's land, tap the Liquimetal Coating, target their land, it becomes locked so they can't tap it. And then all you have to do is plus your Karn and turn your opponent's land into an artifact creature with power and toughness, each equal to its converted mana cost. Now, a land has no converted mana cost. Its converted mana cost is, well, it does have a converted mana cost, but its converted mana cost is a big fat 0. So it becomes a 0/0 creature, and it dies. So you are effectively, taking away your opponent's resources by destroying their lands and making it more and more difficult for your opponent to play the game. So this is very useful if you have a Blood Moon out on the board, but your opponent still has one lonely basic out. You can target their basic, and then all they have is mountains. And so then, if they're playing obviously colours other than red. So this is a useful one that you can use, the Liquimetal Coating. Another one, Ensnaring Bridge. So Ensnaring Bridge, this is basically very good against creature decks. You can hide behind it. So it says creatures with power greater than the number of cards in your hand can't attack. So if you have no cards in hand, your opponent can't attack you. So therefore, they can't kill you. This is, a good one to have against creature decks. Another one is Chalice of the Void. So this one, I like to bring this one in against the Cascade decks in the format at the moment. So the Cascade decks, If you haven't played against them, they are just disgusting. You know, the rhinos I'm not too fussed about. You know, rhinos can be dealt with a lot easier. But the living end is just rank. You know, it has so many free spells in the format that you just it's horrible.
Yep.
So I bring this in when I fetch it, shall I say, with Karn when I'm up against these decks that cast lots of free spells, in particular Living End or Crashing Footfalls. Let's take a look at Engineered Explosives. This is another one that's quite good against rhinos. You can bring it in and wipe pesky rhino tokens off the board. They can go quite wide, so this is quite a useful one to have. Tormod's Crypt, this one comes in against Living End. It's a good one because it costs 0, so you can slam a Karn on turn, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, but you don't have to have any extra mana. You can fetch the Tormod's Crypt straight away, cast it for free, and empty your opponent's graveyard. Then we have Walking Ballista. This one is a win con. This is basically when you're in the late game and you've basically got 1,000 mana on the board, not literally, but when you've got lots of mana on the board, not lots of lands, and you can make a big old Walking Ballista and throw it at your opponent. The next one, Pithing Needle. So this one's particularly good against Planeswalkers. So if you're playing against Liliana or something like that, Liliana, I suppose what's the most common Liliana in the format at the moment? Liliana of the Veil.
Yeah,
Liliana of the Veil. So this is a good one against that. Opposing activated abilities, really. So then we have a Relic of Progenitus. This is kind of a backup to Tormod's Crypt. But what's nice about Relic of Progenitus is that when you look at Karn, it says, with the -2, it says you may choose an artifact card you own from outside the game or in exile. So outside the game meaning your sideboard, or in exile meaning in the exile zone. So this, when you use it, the relic, it puts everything in exile, including itself. So you're able to fetch it again if you need to. And the most important, obviously it removes all cards from the graveyard into exile, but on top of that, it cycles. It's a really nice card to have. Then we have the Wormcoil Engine. So Wormcoil Engine, this one's a nice one. It's a 6 mana, Death Touch Lifelinker, 6/6, and when it dies, put a 3/3 colourless Worm Artifact creature token with Death Touch, and a 3/3 colourless Worm Artifact token with Lifelink onto the battlefield. This one is good against your aggressive decks. If you can slam it, of course. It's quite expensive. It's still 6 mana, but like this deck, if it can produce 4 mana on turn 2, then producing 6 mana, it is possible, to produce 6 mana on turn 3. In fact, I think it's probably possible to, do 7 mana on turn 3. So you're beating Tron at their own game.
1, 3, 7.
Yeah, exactly. So this one's just a nice one to bring in. Now, a nice little interaction that I've basically discovered recently, and it's one of the reasons why I'm testing this card, Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So Fable of the Mirror Breaker, if you're able to copy the Wormcoil Engine with the Fable of the Mirror Breaker, or Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, should I say, the creature side of this enchantment. It makes a copy of Worm Coil Engine. It gains haste. You can attack with that creature, and then you sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So bear in mind, you sacrifice it. Now, whereas there are other effects that say exile it. Is that correct? I'm trying to think of a similar effect, but I know that some of them do. They say exile it at the next end step. But the Worm Coil Engine, it sacrifices, and of course, when a Worm Coil Engine dies, you get 2 3/3 creature tokens with Death Touch and Lifelink. So they're quite nice. There's a quite nice little synergy there between the two that I wanted to test out. The Fable of the Mirror Breaker in this list are the flex slots. I would like to point that out. These are flex slots. I've seen decks running 3 copies of Endurance in the main. So yeah, that can be, that's up to you. You can play Ragavan in there if you want. I've seen people do that as well. Personally, I don't like it, but that's up to you. Then, just in the sideboard, there are 6 cards that are non-artifacts. We don't need to use all of our slots for artifacts for our wish board for Karn, if you like. We have 2 copies of Veil of Summer, 2 copies of Ancient Grudge, and 2 copies of Endurance. So Endurance is there for Murktide, it's there for Cascade, it's really good at dealing with graveyards. Now, obviously, the graveyard doesn't go into exile; it goes onto the bottom of the opponent's library in a random order. But the issue I found with Endurance, in particular against the Cascade decks, is that the Cascade decks run Subtlety, which is Scratch's favourite elemental incarnation in the cycle. And yeah, it's just so difficult against this Living End deck. The Living End deck in particular is just so rough, as I've mentioned. But Endurance, it can interact with it. So that's something useful to know. The Veil of Summer is there again. It's actually there to protect against Force, which is again from the Cascade deck. There's a running theme here. You might notice. I really, really hate that deck. That is a deck that this deck really struggles against, and it's frustrating me that is the case. But I think unless you're running blue, I think you are always going to struggle against that deck. Now, Veil of Summer, I need to double check with you actually, Scratch. Does Veil of Summer affect subtlety in any way?
No. Yeah. Veil of Summer is unaffected by, subtlety is unaffected by Veil of Summer. I think that's the better way of phrasing it. Due to subtlety never having a counter clause on it, subtlety just straight up changes the zone of the spell, which Veil of Summer has no effect over. You would still draw a card because there was a blue spell cast.
But is not hexproof enough?
Hexproof only applies is a ability that only applies when a creature is on the battlefield, just like protection only applies when something is on the battlefield. No, it's subtlety and Aether Gust, unless Aether Gust is targeting the permanent, are both ways of getting around Veil of Summer and uncounterable texts similar to like Dovin's Veto or a Cavern of Souls.
So Veil of Summer is there basically for Force of Negation out of your opponent's deck, or Living End deck, and Rhinos, of course. Also it's a good one to have against Murktide because they have lots of counter spells and blue spells that do things, and they are very annoying. And so this is a good one to have. Then there are 2 copies of Ancient Grudge, as I mentioned.
All right, stop. Hammer time.
How long have you been waiting for that?
I mean, it's quite
That
an
you
ancient
must have
one.
been waiting for that for a little while.
I mean,
You've been thinking about that one. You threw me right off there.
I
Oh,
think
I really. Oh man, I really hope that makes the cut.
I,
Please leave that in.
I think this one just it's so important because of the flashbacks that Hammer Time has left on him.
Ooh.
Yeah, it is. It's a hoser against the Hammer Time
Hmm.
deck. Now, but what's also really good about the Ancient Grudge is, and also with the Boseiju, is that it works really well with liquid metal coating. So you can turn your opponent's anything, literally any permanent at all, you can turn into an artifact, and then you can target it with Ancient Grudge, Boseiju, etc. So that's something that's really useful to know. Also, Boseiju plus Renin 6 plus liquid metal coating is pretty busted.
Yep.
You know,
That's a pretty hard to break combo there.
yeah.
Unless you
Like,
kill red or destroy
you know.
the liquid metal coating. Or
Now,
just concede.
Or concede.
I'll close this off by just talking about the way that this deck actually wins. I've talked a lot about how you cut your opponent off, but how this deck actually wins. Well, it's with Fury. We have Fury, four copies of Fury. Obviously, it's a big old 6/6 beta. But very often, more often than not, you're winning using Clothis. So Clothis, it deals 2 damage to your opponent each turn, and of course, if your opponent is not doing much, then all you have to do is sit back and wait, and your opponent will eventually die. A similar effect is Chandra, Torch of Defiance. You can basically, if you get to ultimate this Planeswalker, yeah, your opponent's basically dead next turn.
I mean,
But even if you don't...
I was gonna say you can kill your opponent just through the upticks. It's not just the
Yes.
ultimate.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you don't ultimate her, yeah, you can still. If you, for example, many situations I've had Chandra and Clothis out at the same time, and you're dealing your opponent 4 damage each turn. And the reason I like this particular prison deck is because you don't do nothing to hurt your opponent. I've seen many prison decks looking at you, Lantern Control, that lock your opponent out, and then they kill the opponent with boredom.
No. Lantern Control kills through milling. It's not an efficient mill plan, but it is a mill plan.
But it's still boredom. Like, I would never get to turn 60 and go, oh, damn,
Hey,
I
Well,
ran out of
it's not
cards."
turn 60.
Hey.
You're killing your opponent usually in between turn 30 and turn 40, and
Yeah,
I guess that is
sorry.
a very fast clock in my opinion.
You're preaching to the choir on that one.
And the court would like to remind the plaintiff that you can concede at any time.
Yes,
You
yes,
can
yes.
concede at any time. Yes, that's true.
I mean-
but I do like, though, that this deck, it can finish the game in quick order. Because, hey, if your opponent can draw into something that, that ruins your plans, then
Well, they can't draw something.
they
on
can't
a
draw it
lantern.
if they're already dead.
No,
So,
they can't draw it when the lantern's out. But sure.
Yeah. But, that's this deck. That's what we're looking at. I've kind of gone through a few things. It's difficult for me to give you a sideboard plan, really, because, well, it's a wish board.
Yeah.
The world is your oyster.
But yeah,
So I'm going to leave you with that.
most of your sideboard is just the main board, as you might say. This is a deck
Yeah.
playing a 69 card main board.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very important that not every deck plays 69 cards, but somehow this deck is able to play 69 cards in the main board without being punished.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, Yorion knows that the more cards make a better deck.
Yorion knows the more cards you put in the deck, the more consistently you'll find your Aether Vial.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
Look,
we learned from Yorion.
I just really am glad that you skipped over my opportunity to punish y'all with a very nice 69 reference for the deck size.
Yeah, I'm glad that we moved on from that quickly.
No, we should have taken that beat. That would have been hilarious.
I mean, we don't need to, we don't always have
Yeah.
to go in the.
I will mention the Fable of the Mirror Breaker has been doing really well for me, by the way. Copying multiple copies of Seasoned Pyromancer, basically just cycling through your entire deck. Copying Fury is it's basically a board wipe every turn.
Swinging in with that double strike.
I also have to say, very important, in case this might just be for newer players, you can still copy the creature with the evoke trigger on the stack. So you can have evoke it and then copy it to have another 4 damage plus the creature to swing in with.
Absolutely, you can do that, and it's very rare that I get to that stage where I need to do that. Because getting to 5 mana for this deck isn't too hard.
But I've had similar scenarios where it's like this is a line of play that I would not expect to see, and then it comes up when you really need it, and then it's good that you know about that line of play.
Yep.
So you've played against this deck before, against me before Scratch. What's your kind of take on this deck? How do you feel like when you come up against this particular archetype?
I think it's a very interesting archetype. I think it is just another Karnza list. To be honest, Karnza is a deck that's trying to deny your mana, and this one is a very specific take by using the Karn as a more focused way of getting card advantage, or Karn advantage as I would like to call it, and at the same time have the ability to destroy your lands. So it's definitely I just said it was another Karnza list, but it's a very specific version of Karnza, but it's not very much drifting off of the main plan of Karnza. But other than that, I still very much enjoy the premise of the list. And playing against it doesn't.
There's no land destruction spells in the deck. There's no pillage.
You don't always need a pillage to destroy your opponent's heart.
And more recently, it's less useful, especially when you got the Seiju.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, also Karn being a pacifist, I think he would frown upon pillaging.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Oh wow, I never thought that. Yeah, that's a good point.
You can't break his achy breaky heart,
Oh.
But how about you? I can see your face, Anthony. You're not sure about that one, are you? But how about you, Anthony? What do you think about this deck?
I like it. I like the constant refresh that Modern goes through, where decks that may have not been the best over the course of most of its life get a nice boost, and that is what Karn did to the Karnza archetype. Having the wish board with Karn gives you access to whatever you need in any sort of situation, and I feel like the colors of red and green are uniquely suited to be able to crank that out as soon as possible, with Arbor Elf and Utopia Sprawl being the kind of main accelerant a lot of the decks are using in the Modern format right now, especially decks like the Elementals deck and 4-color decks.
Ignoble Hierarch, I'd say, is maybe a little more popular. But
honestly, with the 4-color decks that I've been seeing, and Lord Monkey go burr.
Have we talked about the best mana dork of all time, Ragavan?
our Lord and Savior Ragavan.
Yeah, I was about to say, have you heard the gospel of our Lord and Savior?
Death Shaman's got nothing on this bad boy. This bad boy rams while dealing damage.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, well, this card's too powerful for the format. Let's make you make combat damage in order to get Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah, so Ragavan can be quite useful in this deck, because turn one, for example, they say they bolt your Arbor Elf. Turn 2, you can dash a Ragavan. So it does have some utility if you wanted to play a couple, but I wouldn't play any more than a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes a dash of Ragavan might just be too much.
Is there ever going to be a day that you give up with these terrible puns?
Oh, goodness.
Sorry that I'm keep going on with this monkey business, but I just
Joe,
can't
you
stop.
are You were in the wrong company if you're trying to avoid punishment.
Yeah, that's true.
So at the end,
Yeah.
as we always like to do, we have to ask, what is your favorite sideboard card, or what do you think is the best sideboard card in this current modern metagame that you want to pack? For me personally, this is the spiciest one. I personally of the opinion. I love my subtleties, and I'm gonna say subtlety is my favorite sideboard card in that kind of sense. But when it comes to like trying to say spicy, because I think subtlety is just criminally underplayed, just like Joe's deck, definitely should be locked up. Um, that Terminus is my choice of a great sideboard card because it answers a lot of very interesting decks like Dredge and Yawgmoth that you would not be able to answer with any other kind of sweeper.
Fair enough. I think for me it's endurance. Um, just an all-star in the meta at the moment. I bring it in so often in my deck. I could almost see just playing it in the main deck at the moment. It's that powerful.
I'm gonna have to go with one of Modern's longest running unsung sideboard heroes in Engineered Explosives. That card has been doing work since it was printed, and every now and again you'll see a wonderful opportunity that it just blows people out of the water.
It is a great. I think it's always great. I know sometimes it doesn't see meta play, but I feel like it's always there's going to be those aggro decks that you can hit with it. It's a nice catch-all answer. I mean, I've used
Hmm.
it today in my legacy games to get a defense grid with it. Like sometimes you just gotta get creative with it, and
Yep.
it's an all-around very good card in my opinion. And I can absolutely agree with your assessment of saying that it is one of your favorite sideboard cards. But
Yeah.
not now it's not just time to hear us ramble and talk about what decks there are and what sideboard cards we like. We would also like to hear from you guys what your favorite sideboard card is. So please let us know what's the spiciest or the most interesting or favorite sideboard card that you currently see or play in this current modern meta. Well then, have a good one. See ya.
See you later, everybody.
Take it easy.